Hello, everyone. I am the aspect of Miles Morales. I am here bringing you all the news that's fit to print. Fuck J. Jonah Jameson. He sucks. He's a butthole. And now I throw live to the Citadel.
Reporting live from the Citadel. Everything's going horribly wrong, as is typical in the Mass Effect universe. But mostly we're here to talk about video games. So we're going to ignore all the apocalyptic predictions and go straight for some stuff about Spider-Man, for example. Mikey, what are we talking about today?
All right, we are talking about Yakuza, Like a Dragon, and Miles Morales. Well, I'm talking about that. And my experience of both of them, not on the PS5 specifically, but through PS5 Remote Play. Zavi went back to an old favorite, Rogue Company, and Stacy gets
It's
into
not
a
that
bit...
old.
Not old?
It's pretty new. But also, I forgot to introduce everyone.
That's right, you did.
That's Mikey. He is
Failure.
You previously heard Stacy. And a newcomer. A new fire has entered the building.
Or a new slime appears.
New slime appears.
I'm James.
Hey,
Hello,
James.
Jay.
Hello, James. Well, back to business as usual. And Stacey's going to get into a bit of news. We're going to talk about, basically, it's just a lot of Apple digital legal nonsense. I feel like it's just like the new landscape of our digital legal world of like finding out rights, finding who gets this sort of money and that sort of money, and who gets this and who gets that.
And ultimately, can the kids play the Fortnite on their iPads? That's really what
That's
we
what it
want to
kind
know.
of comes
We
down
do it
to.
for the kids,
Can I play
ladies and
this on my
gentlemen.
computer? No. All right, you guys suck. Can I play this
Think
on
of
my
the children.
Yes. Yes, think of the children. Think of the freaking children. And and lastly, we're going to get a little bit of tabletop going on with Shadowrun 6th World. So, without further ado, we shall get started. So on my PS5, what do I call it, adventure, I am continuing
Odyssey.
to play a couple of games that came out. Both were launch games, Yakuza Like a Dragon and Miles Morales. Funny thing about these two games is I've played them mostly on my PlayStation 4. So I haven't been home, but I've been connecting through my PlayStation 5 through the Remote Play app. And I will say that it works basically flawlessly. You have a couple of options to stream either at 720p or 1080p. And depending on your connection, you'll get some artifacting and some messages saying, oh, it might not be strong enough for the connection.
Clear,
However,
this is PS5 Remote Play.
Yes, PS5 Remote Play.
So
Yeah, so it should have appeared on your cross-media bar maybe like a week or so before the PlayStation 5 came out. And I guess everyone was wondering, oh, what's that? What's that? So it came out, it flawlessly connected because my account is both on this PlayStation 4 and that PlayStation 5. So it shows, oh, it gives you an option. Do you want to connect to this PS5 random number after it? And then you do it and then it works. It takes a couple of, like maybe a minute or so to connect, but then it just loads you up on the PlayStation 5's media bar or cross media bar. And that's it. You pick your games. The only thing that seems that you can't do is access any media devices, any media apps except for Spotify, probably through licensing. But I was just like, I wonder if that works. But no, Hulu, Netflix don't work through Remote Play. So yeah, I couldn't really get any lag. Like I didn't notice any lag from my controls, maybe slight, but like very, very, very slight. And I guess that only really depends on the type of game that you're playing.
when I play Demon 4 to 5 type of thing? Is this it runs on PS5, you are playing it on a PS4?
Yeah, so I'm connecting to my PlayStation 5 through the internet. Like when I turn it off, it actually says, would you like to put it into rest mode or would you like to turn your PlayStation off? So I always put it into rest mode so it could be accessed, because you can't access the Remote Play if your PlayStation is not on. It has to be left in rest mode. So it's been cool. I've definitely got some glitches. Like I know that the PS5 has had, people are saying it's been a little bit funky. Like there's some funniness that goes on. I think with some games. I've definitely had Demon Souls sort of crash on me a couple of times, but nothing hard crashes. Like it kind of crashes and then you have to restart it. And that this is not immune to that either. I had one issue where it did sort of not hard crash, but I think Demon Souls crashed, and then because of it, it disconnected the remote play, and then it actually did disconnect. Sorry, it disconnected from remote play, but it actually disconnected it permanently. So my brother was home. I texted him and said, "Hey, could you just restart my PS5?" And once I did, I was able to remote play again. So those are the only
Nice.
negatives about it. But other than that, it's been working great.
Yeah, and that's something that they hopefully like iron out because
Yeah,
Sony is to me someone who like when I think about the platforms, right? That's what I think of them as platforms. This is no
yeah,
longer the console wars, this is the platform wars.
yeah,
And obviously remote play is one of the things that every single platform has been talking about as like, look, we're doing it too, right?
yeah.
So I've been dicking around with Steam Links since they came out. I've been dicking around with Steam controllers. I've been dicking around with every single streaming service, and they all mostly suck. But that's because like latency and all these like serious technical issues. But GeForce Now, which we'll talk about later, is probably the one where I was just like, oh, this is almost imperceptible latency. I can play Rocket League on this service and it doesn't suck. So it sounds like Sony is in that ballpark now.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't suck at all. I will say maybe faster games, you can tell a little bit of a sort of a not a latency delay, but sort of like maybe a visual delay. I'd be curious for you to try it, Zavi, like when you get your PlayStation 5, maybe like hook it up in a different room and just see.
Oh, I
But
will.
like Miles Morales, like it's been working fine. I haven't had any like super issues, but you can definitely tell like sometimes there's a little issue of it like keeping up a bit, but very, very rarely. It's like it's hard to describe. It's like you know like when you have rollback lag, sort
Yes.
of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sort of. Only it
Absolutely.
doesn't
Rubber
roll
banding.
back. It's just like, no, no, no. You know what? It better disclaims. Do you remember like old 8-bit lag where it'll like slow down and like you can still sort of keep up with it? It's like
It's
it's not.
a frame
Sure.
rate dip, and it's a frame rate
Yeah,
dip that is ultimately caused by the network because on your
yeah,
PS5 everything is running at 60 frames per second and it's all
yeah,
fine and it's all beautiful.
yeah.
But that PlayStation 5 might be struggling to generate the frames and simultaneously upload the frames.
Yes, thank you, Tech Wizard, for explaining all of that because I couldn't. But yeah, that's basically it. But like Demon Souls, that doesn't happen. It's a slower game. Yakuza Like a Dragon, that doesn't happen. It's a slower game. And any
Yeah.
game I expect that's going to be like a slower paced game, you won't have that
Yeah.
issue.
Sekiro would
Because
be a good
Spider-Man
test
is
because you need the timing window to be like very precise.
for Spider-Man.
No, Sekiro.
Yeah,
I've beaten it
yes. I
twice.
wouldn't recommend playing Sekiro over remote play. I mean, though, now that you say that, that's one of the few PlayStation 5 4 games that I have downloaded. I might try it over remote play just to see if how
Yep.
it works. Just
So
to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
if anyone has ever played Rock Band when you did not calibrate it correctly,
Yeah.
that is what you're in for on a service like GeForce Now
Oh wow.
or that sort of thing, right? Because the what you end up having to do, which is a challenge, is
Mhm.
you have to delay your inputs accordingly, which not everyone can do. And if the timing window is prohibitively small, you're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta say, my gut instinct is you want to keep to 60 frames max on
Hmm.
this. Fewer
Hmm.
frames is going to be better in terms of trying to
Yeah.
thread that needle where your
And for
video card can
Spider-Man,
keep up.
and Spider-Man Miles Morales PS4 runs at 30 frames per second. So this game is playable as long as you're receiving 30 frames per second.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm probably playing in the resolution mode because I think it comes with that option on default. So it probably is playing at 30 frames.
And if you
And
switch
again,
it, you might actually get better performance.
yeah, I'm playing on hard mode, and like I said, I've never felt that I've missed like a dodge because of latency or lag because I've never
Right.
felt it. It's more of like what you described, where
Yeah.
it's keep trying to keep up with the frame rate, but it isn't necessarily affecting your gameplay, which are like, oh my God, I pressed the button. Why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? It's just sort of transferring slower than it's keeping up with what's actually going on.
Right.
So that's been good. The game is pretty great. I feel like I spent a lot of time on the technical, a little bit too much time, but I'm really enjoying the
My
game.
fault.
I sort of like what you were saying, like he's just a really wholesome sort of cool character to be around. You want to be in his world. I think the handing off the torch to him just, for this time was like really cool. And like, it gives you a lot of confidence, like to be Miles and be like, yeah, I do want to be a good job. Like Pete's been taking care of the city for like, 7 years. Like, nah, he just wants to go on vacation, let me handle it and call it a day. It really gives it a nice sort of special feeling because it is a Christmas game and we don't get too many of those. It's like
That's something people have been talking about, is that this is a game that like you can return to every Christmas.
yeah, it's a Christmas game, like Dead Rising 4, I believe, and Division. These are all Christmas games, that you
Division is a Christmas game in the darkest possible
yeah.
way.
Yeah, Christmas games, but
Yeah.
it is really nice just sort of feeling it. And I was listening to a podcast and one of the commentators were talking about like, yeah, watching that one of the early scenes, and they showed this where he's walking through like a Christmas market in Harlem, and you're just like, oh man, like we can't really do that this year, or it's not going to be there this year,
Yeah.
in a sense of like, it kind of feels like, man, I kind of want to do that stuff, and like things that seem a little bit banal or that we take for granted, like you kind of want to involve yourself in these things. But
That's real for me, because like for me it's all about the Union Square market that I am used to seeing, because I
yeah,
usually worked around there
yeah,
during Christmas.
yeah,
And I just walk around it, maybe buy something, usually not because I'm cheap. And like, but it's a nice experience. And in
yeah,
this game, I love going near Union Square and
yeah,
going, this should be way bigger.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
food.
Well, what do you
People are
want?
just very nice. They're getting apple donuts. They have like a cider. People are like selling things. They're farmer markets.
Yep,
It's
yep.
people who make things. I actually went last year and bought like maybe a couple things from just creators and designers that I gave to nephews and family members, and it really felt good
Exactly.
to
The
like
gifts are perfect.
people. Yeah, just
But
making in their
but
home.
but but on the topic of like what can you do, actually, Stacy, this is why I'm excited for the next Spider-Man game, because the only reason they did not make a New York City to scale is because you need to be able to traverse the entire city at a certain pace.
Yeah,
And we
Yeah.
know that Spider-Man's top speed has to do with the loading speed of the
yeah,
city. And we
Right.
know that Massive Entertainment has done New York at scale in the expansion to the Division 2. So you put two and two together, and the next Spider-Man game has the potential to actually be New York at scale, which is worth all of my money.
yeah.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
would be. It would be super fun.
that would be a lot though.
It's
That's
it would be a lot, in the sense that like that's a technical feat that
and when you say New York, do you just mean
Sony.
Manhattan or do you mean New
Of
York?
course, of course, of course. I mean, that's the reason that the first division is scoped to Midtown, and that's the reason that the expansion is scoped to downtown Manhattan, and
Mm.
they
So they
only
just
did
need
Brooklyn.
Uptown. Really.
Yeah, and they only did and they only did Brooklyn in the episode 3 of the
Yeah.
Division 2 leading up to the expansion. Like you can do these things at scale, but it is definitely a technical feat to still do
It
all of the
does feel
artistry.
like the underlying company is very systematically doing piece by piece until they get it all. I wouldn't be
Mhm.
surprised to do, okay, we're going to do the Bronx, and people are like, the Bronx, but if you're going to build a whole city, man,
Well, and
That's
if you're going
you're
up,
going to have to do Staten Island sooner or later. I mean, I
yeah.
know.
no, 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 we never do Staten
Uh,
Island. No, 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 no. Rockstar has set the precedent. There is no Staten Island. There
I
is only
see.
New Jersey. That is how it
New
works. That
Jersey.
is
I'm
how it
just going to skip
works.
straight to New Jersey.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
Staten Island
All
I
doesn't
mean,
right.
matter.
wouldn't you?
Wouldn't you?
Oh wow. Yeah, but so
I'm not
yeah,
saying I want to build it, but
I'm really
anyway.
excited to sort of get through it. I'm maybe about maybe 3 or 4 hours in, and the story's moving at a really brisk pace. So I'm really enjoying it. I think like Miles Morales is probably you know the most popular sort of handing of the torch sort of character of like Marvel, like moving characters and switching things up. Just He's just a
Yeah.
likable character, and I think like the company has been making very good projects starring him from
Yeah.
Into the Spider-Verse and the comic series run.
Yeah. Sony is
Comic
so
runs.
heavily invested in pivoting to Miles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
really good good pivot, and I think like when you really invest the character and invest resources into someone like, hey, we really want to build this person up to last generations. We're
Uh-huh.
not putting Peter to the side. Peter's still there. We have since the 40s, 50s of Peter
Yeah.
Parker's story. He's still there. He's
There's
still very
there's no
important.
way that they're not like in the MCU. Like they had
Yeah,
their breakup and then they had their like, all right, let's fuck again moment.
yeah,
And like obviously that has to do with like we came up with a deal that allows everyone to make a fuck ton of money, which is
yeah,
why Miles Morales is gonna be in the next Spider-Man thing.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
if he's
yeah.
not,
It's
then what
weird.
the fuck is Marvel thinking?
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. And speaking of different types of protagonists, I'm shifting to Yakuza Like a Dragon, and
Mm.
this is a really fun game. I've actually always struggled to sort of get into a Yakuza game. I know it's for me. I love JRPGs. I like Japanese culture, yada yada, blah blah blah. But it's always been pretty rough for me to sort of get into a Yakuza game, and I don't know why. I think maybe something's been out, but this is an RPG, JRPG, turn-based, and like maybe this is something a little bit slower place for me to get into, but I'm really enjoying it. And also, I think one thing that needs to be mentioned that I don't really hear people talking about is that the main characters are a little uncommon. Like,
Mm.
the three main characters are three middle-aged Japanese men. Like, the main
Mm.
character is
Hmm.
42,
Well,
you
there's
know?
been this
Yeah.
curious thing in Japanese culture where they're obsessed with young protagonists,
Yes.
and recently like they're starting to shift. It's part of the cultural shift. You heard people talk about the reaction to Ghost of Tsushima and basically go
Mm.
like, this game should have been made in Japan, but it's fucking awesome, and so thank you. So like it's part of this
Yeah. Well, one
conversation.
of the things they've said is that the actor is perfect, but would have never been cast in Japan. And I
Yeah,
thought that was an interesting kind of critique of their own culture.
Meanwhile,
yeah,
Yakuza from the jump has been about middle-aged men. But like I
yeah,
played Kiwami a little bit,
yeah.
and it holds up in some ways. It doesn't hold up in others. But it made me very, very interested in the franchise. And when I heard that this is a turn-based, I was like, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I
Yeah.
thought Kiryu was young, like in his 20s.
Kiryu is kind of middle-aged in a weird way because the in Kiwami, the very first one, the remake of the very first one, he is young, and then he goes to jail for 10 years.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. So then this is just my ignorance of the series then. But I don't think he's 42 unless it's the last one, but they're definitely aged.
It also reminds me of like mafia shows and movies that you see
Yeah.
made out of Hollywood.
Yeah.
There is this sense like there's a fascination of what do you do with someone when they're getting a little long in the tooth for the job?
Yeah.
yes,
What happens to them?
Yeah.
yes.
Well, so the way this starts out is that this is a clean break from Yakuza and Kiryu Kazuma. You star as Ichiban, and he was basically just, a kid raised in a brothel. He was an orphan, and he grew up in the streets of Kamurocho, which is
Kiryu's an orphan as
the
well.
setting
Yep.
of the Yakuza game. He, was a big shithead, and he tried, fucking around with like Yakuza back in when he was like young. And he said like he was part of a Yakuza and he made some random name. They were about to kill him, and one of a Yakuza boss sort of found out what was going on. He cut off his finger to save him, and he ended up just like sort of being ingratiated to this Yakuza boss. He would stand outside and wait for him to like say, "Hey, I want to be a part of your crew. I want to be a part of your crew." And then after like many months or weeks, I forgot, he's like waiting outside. He says, "Fine, you can be a part of the crew." That's his patriarch. He loves him. He does anything for him. Something happens and he ends up taking the fall for a crime.
Mm.
He ends up going to jail for 15 years, but gets into an altercation and they extend his sentence by 18 by 3. So when he gets out, he finds his
Mm.
patriarch and he finds out that he's basically betrayed his clan and
Oof.
he's, sort of excommunicated him. He finally gets up to him and he shoots him and throws him like in the trash in a new town of Yokohama. So the main area right now is Yokohama. I'm not sure if you'll go back to Kamurocho, but right now you're in Yokohama and you're sort of piecing out what you're going to do with your life. But he's sort of this really idealized character. He really loves Dragon Quest, and they like use sounds and
That's funny.
reference Dragon Quest. They asked Square Enix for permission, and he wants to be a
Wild.
hero. So there's basically a power vacuum of like these three clans, and they're actually a Korean clan, a Chinese clan, and I think another Japanese Yakuza clan sort of fighting for power in Yokohama, and you're going around fixing people's problems. But just like Miles Morales is just very likable character. Your first companion is this ex-police officer who tried to fix corruption, but he basically trusted the wrong people, and they gave the corrupt like police head what told him what he was doing, and then he got shipped off to the DMV. So, and then you're with a homeless guy who was an ex-nurse, and I have just reached a fourth party member who is a twin of the first case, like the first big case, where basically they were killing elderly people to claim their retirement money because they wouldn't report their deaths. So yeah, this is Yakuza.
That's a good example of uniquely Japanese crimes, actually, because
Yeah.
I happen to know
Yeah.
that like when it comes to the police in Japan, they don't report anything as a murder if they don't have to,
Yeah.
because they keep the numbers down, because Japan is the safest place in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's a really smart example of like how to fuck with
Yeah.
that.
But yeah, there's a lot of like commentary going on. Like in the beginning, you first talk about like, you get thrown in like this homeless area, and Ichiban is like, come on, let's go. Like, we got to do it. We got to, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And they're like, no, that's not the way it works. But they do all go to like this thing where you can get jobs. I don't think it's called the soap land is the brothel. This other place, I forgot what it's called, where you go and you apply for jobs. So he sort of gets a couple of the homeless people to go and apply for jobs and at least start. And this is basically how they get around, because there's a person that works at the job center who they find out whose dad is at the senior center, and that's how you're sort of wrapped into the first sort of mystery of many mysteries, I'm sure. They have their funny side quests, like catching people peeing in the river, someone who gets caught at a soap land, which is a brothel outside, and they're only covered by suds, so you have to escort them back to their apartment, while obviously this night everyone is out watering their plants, so now you have to escort him around old Japanese women who are watering their plants, because if you water them, then all his suds will be sprayed off, and you'll be called by the police for indecent exposure. So this is
Wow.
I mean, they don't show
Brilliant.
anything. It's very,
Oh, but that's
like,
brilliant. That's brilliant coding. Like, what is this? What does the soap mean? Like, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and it's
oh,
also
so
obviously hilarious because like soap is short for a brothel, basically.
yeah. So yeah, I actually had to look it up. I didn't even know that soapland meant like brothels. So
Yeah, the very first
yeah.
in Kiwami, they're immediately talking about like soap this and soap that. The intro to the game features one of the strangest and funniest and most frustrating side quests I've ever seen, because you're going to go buy a ring for this chick that you presumably love. She grew up with you in an orphanage, but you're not sisters or whatever, right? Like she's like the love interest character. You
Yeah.
go, you buy the ring. It costs all your money, and now you're broke, right? Then you get pickpocketed. You track down the pickpocket, and he goes, I already pawned it. You go to the pawn shop, and the guy doesn't believe you, so you need to buy it back. Then you go to your friend,
No.
and your friend goes, you must really want to go to a soap land. Here's some money. You go to the to the pawn guy. You buy the you offer to buy the ring, but the price has gone up a little bit. So you go back to your guy, and he goes, "Oh my God, you're back already? You must really like this soap land. I need to figure out which one it is." You go back to try to buy the ring, and he goes, "You know what? I looked at it and I looked into it slightly, but you're right. This probably got stolen. I don't want to get in trouble. Here's the ring, free of charge." So now
So now you've got all this money.
you have the starting money that the game wants you to have to start the game, and you've learned what a soap land is.
Yes.
That's the important
It is a
information.
very
Clearly.
roundabout way of teaching you.
It's funny, but it's also like, I hate this game.
I'll also feel like as a parent, I'd be like, no, you can't play this.
Well, good,
That's the
because
first quest.
the intro to the game is genuinely like obtuse, but if you don't understand the joke and you don't understand the sense of humor, you're just gonna put
Yeah.
the game down.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose.
Just quick one more thing, because you said that the game is like Miles Morales is super holistic too. Like he's going around, teaching people things and having these like fun moments and like really heartfelt moments about like being a good person and doing the right thing. So with all the joking around, usually every end of a mission is usually like really happy and jokey, or it's like really nice and it teaches you a good message about being a good person. So, and that's it.
And then there's a game that does not teach you how to be a good person.
Oh,
For as obvious, Rogue Company? No,
it doesn't?
I don't think so.
Rogue Company is so let's do some intro here. Rogue
Yeah, yeah.
Company is Epic Games' attempt to go after the Counter-Strike market. It is developed by High Res Studios, who are extremely veteran in terms of making free-to-play games. These are the guys who made Smite, for example, that is available on every single console and every single way you can possibly play it, and
Mhm.
which happens to be a third-person MOBA, multiplayer online battle arena. And this game is Counter-Strike with style, which immediately might make you think, but what about Valorant? And Rogue Company's niche is specifically Counter-Strike with style that you can play anywhere. Valorant is PC only. This is play on Switch. This is play on PlayStation. This is play on anything that will run this. So one day it'll probably have a mobile version. So
Okay.
this is in beta. It's free to play. The monetization is largely around buying a single starter pack to buy more characters. There's tiers to the starter pack, but you can get a shitload of characters for $30. And it already plays better than a lot of free to play shit. You can see here on the footage,
Sure.
if you're watching on video, like how it roughly works. And the main thing that this game has over Counter Strike is style. Style up every orifice that you could possibly want it to be. Like it is so good
Oh,
at
that's so cool.
immediately, yeah, it is so good at immediately conveying like how this is going to have style with its intro marketing, its sound design, and its graphic
Mhm.
design. The characters all look cool. They all fit archetypes. They all immediately communicate what it's going to be like to actually play this guy in a team setting. They all communicate like what you probably want to do with them, and it all kind of fits. So right here, I happen to be playing as Dima, and Dima is the Russian tank of the character selection. You'll see that I died, and now we're looking at a couple other characters here and there. And it just looks like Counter-Strike, but it's third person, over the shoulder Counter-Strike that works on console. And how do they do that? Map design. So you can play this on PC, but if you play this on console, you're not going to get destroyed by everyone who has a PC. Because if you know how to manipulate a controller and you know how to check your corners and you know how to be careful, you will be okay. A sniper on PC will still ruin your day, but if you allow yourself to keep turning the corner where you know that there's a sniper, you're gonna die. And you're gonna die if that sniper is using a controller or using a mouse. You're just gonna
Yeah.
fucking die.
I see one prominent sniper tower, but otherwise it's
Just
not that
going
tall a map.
So on this map, there is no sniper tower. There's
Oh, there
geometry
isn't.
that you cannot get to that looks
Ah,
like
that
a
looks
sniper
like one.
tower, but
Ah,
but in terms of the level design, they're very clear, they're very intentional. There is a level that has a sniper tower, and it's central, and it's hard to control because you're exposed,
yeah,
as a
you're
sniper
surrounded.
should be,
Hmm.
right? So you can see now this guy flanked around and like how quickly I died, right?
Yeah, it's
Time
very
to
zippy.
kill. Yeah,
You
time
don't
to
you don't
kill.
have any of this nonsense where you get shot 50 times and you're
Right.
still
Time
walking
to
around.
kill. Time to kill is essential in a tactical squad-based game, right? You
Yeah.
turn that corner when you shouldn't have, you're dead. You're dead, Felicia. That's it. Period. And like, that's the way that like these kind of games work. Compare that, for example, to my most recent before this tactical obsession, which is Overwatch. In Overwatch, if you turn a corner and you get peppered with a couple shots, meh. If healers are doing their job, meh. Who cares? Doesn't matter. In this game, the support characters are not about healing you. The support
No.
characters are about picking you up when you are down.
Right.
And
So you're still gonna drop, and if they drop too, you're fucked.
and that
You're done.
distinction doesn't exist in Counter-Strike. In
Yeah.
Counter-Strike, you turn a corner and you get shot a couple times, you are low in health for the rest of the match. Here you have regenerating health on a cooldown timer from the last time that you got hit. So
Oh,
if you manage to stay behind cover, you're probably fine. Certain characters have a perk, a lot of them do, that allows that cooldown timer to be significantly less. These are your flankers, basically.
And to be clear, you have to purchase these perks between matches, right?
Yes. So the way that this game roughly is structured is you have rounds and you have your match and you have different game modes. Every round is very fast, generally speaking. Every match takes about 15 to half hour, depending on how good the match is and what mode you're playing. And so that's another thing in this game that's really good is the mode selection is very simple and very intentional, by which I mean you know what you're getting into. If you play the mode that I recommend most people start with, Extraction, the game is fast and there's a lot of back and forth because the point that you're supposed to control, it alternates between obviously team A is going to get there first and obviously team B is going to get there first. And this one depends. This one depends on who gets there first and who is smart enough to use smoke grenades and who's smart enough to blah, blah, blah. So like, because it has this kind of cadence to it, it makes it so that you can learn the game very well. Then you have your standard deathmatch mode, but even that has an objective. It's called strikeout. The objective doesn't matter very much because something that is common across all the modes is that capturing an objective takes like 3 seconds, but it doesn't matter until the match timer starts to approach 0. So if you just think that like holding the objective is the most important thing in the world, it's not.
Mm.
You have
Right.
to actually think about it. If
You
you
need
kill
it at the right
everyone on the
time.
opposite team and they did not capture the objective, you win that round, period. If they captured the objective, you need to go defuse the bomb or dehack the thing. And if you engage with the objective before the timer matches 0, you're good, period. So you can see like the way that they have that the design really turns into like a tactical, beautiful little dance that resembles Counter-Strike, but it has style. Characters have abilities, which Counter-Strike doesn't have, and you can buy different guns and you can upgrade them in particular ways, which is how you choose your loadout throughout the course of a match. There is no room here for them to monetize everything to death because the moment that they go, now you buy the ability to start with 500 extra dollars, everyone is just gonna fucking riot. And they know this because the design screams, if you play a match, it's a fair match. Like most games nowadays, they've recognized that if you try to be, Activision, everyone hates you.
Yeah, fair play beats microtransactions every time
Yeah. So really
on a
what they're
competitive game.
right. So what they're trying to gate you behind is characters and style, which is important because these characters are cool.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
although I'm gonna
It
I'm gonna
came
take
up.
a brief moment. As far as style goes, I forget the name of the characters. This lady with the blades. She's
Ronan?
got a knife. No, Ronan. Okay, you can see her right in front of the screen here. Her pants are so shiny that it's super distracting. It's super distracting.
Yes.
Either change the pants or just dial down the sheen of the material. Something,
Yeah.
because it's like, woof.
Yeah, this game definitely suffers from
Something.
being male gazy, right? Like
Yeah.
the character, the singular female character that you get to play without paying money is this male fantasy Japanese badass samurai lady with shiny pants, right? And
And a
like
midriff. Yeah.
and a slight midriff, yes. And so like, and she has like big boobs. And she's clearly mixed race, which is kind of cool. But the other, like most of the female characters are fucking hot, which, from a style perspective, I guess. But like, they need to do a little bit of work there, I think, if they want to like really seriously capture diversity in a way that makes sense, because it's too male gazy right now. Now that said, under the paid characters, you have a lot more options. You have a black woman, and she has nice looking hair for a black woman. Like it actually looks like her natural fucking hair. You have
Yeah,
a
overall
character
the
named
character design
Scorch.
is great. I don't have a problem with it. It's just that that's the default female character. You see her in every match and it's distracting.
Yes. So you have a character named Scorch, for example, who I'm probably going to play as when I buy more characters, because I've already played this game enough where it's just like take my money. And Scorch is basically Phoenix from X-Men, except it like instead of being magical, she lost an arm in war and now has a bionic arm that is a flamethrower.
That's just cool. I'm cool with that.
That's the coolest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
And honestly, if she was the default character, I wouldn't have even mentioned this.
Yeah, because
You know,
because they're all actually modestly dressed and it all makes
right?
sense. It's just these pants are just like stare at my ass.
Yes,
So,
and it, as you were mentioning, causes other players to react a certain way as well. So if you're a
yeah.
girl and you want to play a girl character, expect to get humped. It's gonna happen. That's
I
not the
don't
most
think I
pleasant
don't
competitive
think the
experience
shiny
for a
pants
woman.
are preventing people from humping her, but
No, they hump everyone. They hump everyone. So like this is a
Just
game
her
that
more.
suffers if you want to be like very serious in terms of like community standards and stuff. This is a
Right.
game that genuinely suffers from teabagging. This is a community that genuinely suffers from like people figuring out ways to like gloat when they kill you that feel gross, right? So like that can make you angry, like no bullshit. And I know myself enough that like I know what can trigger me and I know what I can handle. And the good news is voice chat is off by default,
Yeah.
I think. I don't hold me to that. There's an easy setting to turn all voice chat off. There's an easy setting to between push to talk versus open mic. You
And
can
they do a
control
reasonable good job of making emotes available that are just,
exactly.
file
So like
selection.
in terms of like trying to like celebrate a victory, there's a one button press thing where your character just dances and everyone has the same dance and it's kind of cool. And then you can also use that one button shortcut to like spray on a wall. So if you want to do that, that's cool. There's things they need to work on. Like if you have just finished a match and you're in the post game thing, disable the ability for someone to rapidly tap and toggle the crouch.
mm,
No more
Yeah.
teabagging. That's it. It's not fucking
Right.
hard to
Or
do.
or during that little loading screen where theoretically what you should be doing is buying perks and weapons and stuff. Like there's no need
Yeah.
for crouching in that moment. It doesn't do anything
That's
for
that's
you.
not that's not true. That's not true. So in terms of style, no, seriously, in terms of style, when it comes to jumping out of a plane, which is a thing now that little kids fucking love doing because of Fortnite.
Sure.
And this game legitimately is targeting Fortnite
And
in some
Apex
ways.
Legends.
So if you play
Right.
Strikeout, that's the closest thing to Fortnite. Everyone drops
Sure.
their gun. So if you're in the middle of a thing and like you're running low on ammo, you can actually just pick up a gun of a person that you just killed and then like do shit. And this is something that like kids are really good at because they played the fuck out of Fortnite.
Yeah.
So you can, as Ronin, for example, take your sword, throw it at someone. That downs them. You switch to your gun, you kill them. They drop all their weapons. That weapon includes a baseball bat. You pick up the baseball bat and you throw it at the next person. And you can see
Right.
how high level play in this game is going to be the most hype shit that you can imagine because people can pull things off in theory that will make you lose your mind. But because the pace is so slow, this game is actually watchable.
mm. Yeah,
Although just watching that body
we're
slide
all
across
playing
the
gameplay right
concrete right
now.
there.
Beta.
Yeah.
It seems very it's very watchable.
Hmm.
It is. It
Mm.
is. I can totally see there being like a competitive
Who is this
version of
again?
this and it
Valve or
being
Blizzard?
High Res Studios, which I think is a subsidiary of Epic Games.
right.
Epic. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
it for me talking about Rogue
Perfect.
Company. I found myself playing it all night a couple days ago, like literally all night, and I was like, this is fine. This is like I want to spend my time doing this. This is such a good team-based, fun thing to do, and
Yeah.
I'm having fun with it.
Right.
That like as this develops, there's a Discord for like people who are trying to set up esports teams. There's a Discord for people who are just looking for a group in general. They're both official Discords, so they have good rules
Right.
about not being a piece of shit. There's like all of this stuff that they're putting behind it because they have Epic's money, presumably, that allows them to be like, this is gonna be a thing. And that's something I look for because Epic has also done a good job of empowering Psyonix with Rocket League to say, this is gonna be a thing. And so like that's another part that makes me go like, this is cool. Valorant looks interesting. it's for PC people. It's backed by Riot Games. They only really do stuff in an earnest fashion on PC because that's where they get their money, because their markets are actually China, Korea, and so on. They have that ownership by Tencent. It's all of these things that make these divisions in these type of games. These games can coexist 110%.
Yep.
Oh, all right.
Speaking of coexisting or
Yeah,
not
I know. These
coexisting,
are some great segues.
there we go. I'm on fire today. No, what I wanted to talk about is the ongoing saga between Epic Fortnite and Apple Store. And of course, other companies are involved as well. There's a
So
lot of
quick
concern
question.
about the Apple Store and its typical 30% cut of sales. That's a lot.
Mm,
James, how much do you know about this war?
Almost nothing.
Almost
All
nothing?
right.
All right, let's
All
get the
right.
man up to speed.
So yeah, and I'll just do a little screen sharing so you can see uh, the root of the issue, as far as this particular lawsuit goes, is Fortnite is no longer available on the iStore, right? So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you cannot get it because that's really your method of purchasing things. At one point, they tried to offer stuff through their site that was disabled, so now you cannot download through Epic's store
And for
Fortnite and play
context,
it.
Apple's legal argument has always will be until they lose that they actually, excuse me, that was gross, support all apps on their devices, but they are in two categories. The apps that they support are either iPhone apps, which you download through their store, or, and this goes out to Apple, web apps that you can run on their Safari web browser, which is relevant to this story.
Right. So there are already games available through the Safari web browser. Nvidia's GeForce Now service is probably the most popular way to go about this right now. And they have just announced that they are going to support Fortnite soon, meaning we don't know exactly when this is going to happen. But it's also notable that GeForce Now is expected to be available in the Chrome browser on all platforms in January of 2021, so coming soon, basically. And that's just going to broaden the reach even more for
You know,
this
when you think
service.
about this platform competition that we have here, on one side you have Apple, and they are responsible for most mobile in-app purchase revenue, I think, because they have the people who can afford it, and they have the store that makes it easy, and they have the better software that actually makes it simple for
Right.
developers to do in-app purchases. And Epic has the Unreal Engine, which can make it just as simple if Apple would just stop taking 30%.
Right. So this is important too because the Apple Store in general is under antitrust investigation, basically worldwide. The European Commission did some investigating earlier this year, and it's still under investigation. The House Antitrust Committee forced Apple to testify earlier this year. And in general, this has to do with, as you were calling it, the platform wars, right? At one point, it was pretty much Steam on the PC market. You had your PlayStation and Xbox consoles,
Everything
and
was
then
siloed.
everything was on the Apple Store if you had an Apple device.
Everything was what we would call a walled garden.
Right. And this might not be so much of an issue, except in some cases, the cuts that were being taken from the vendors were just outrageous. In the world of publishing, music production, books, movies, 10% is a reasonable cut of profits. But we were looking at up to 30% just being the norm on these walled gardens.
And it is the norm. Steam still takes 30.
Yeah. So what Apple's just announced is that they're going to drop their cut to 15%, but only for vendors that make less than $1 million. So that's great if you're a small publisher, if you're an indie publisher, but even some indies are going to be too large for this. And certainly other major software makers like Epic, you know, and the other large ones out there, EA, for example, are going to be way too big to
And Epic
qualify for
has the
this
biggest
discount.
dog in this fight because through their engine, there is a percentage that they do take from the revenue of anyone who makes an Unreal Engine game and publishes it. That take is like 5%. Now, if you distribute it through the Epic Game Store, then you get one lump sum percentage, and I think it's 15, and I don't know whether or not that's true. But Apple is, in a sense, matching the 15% in terms of indies who don't actually make more than $1 million gross. And that's a starting point, which is already a big improvement for everyone who's an indie developer. So they're taking away any indie support from Epic's claims and saying, you got to do better than this.
But even then, the indies aren't taking the bait. I've linked in the notes to an article by The Verge that looks at some of the responses to this. And one of the things they point out is that's great, but if I have to go through the Apple iStore, I have to use their payment system, right? Let's say that they're
Notoriously annoying, for the record.
yeah, it is. It's clumsy, it's not elegant, but most importantly, if it's not secure, there's nothing you as a vendor can do about it.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden everyone's credit card stuff gets hacked, they have no ability to stop that. Nothing, right? And they can't easily switch to some other vendor or even provide information to users that that's happened to them because it's all in Apple's hands.
And that's an interesting argument, but it's also a slightly flawed one. Because in particular, if you do in-app purchase through Apple, Apple knows, quote unquote, knows about the user's billing information, but the company doesn't have to know. They just get signals that say they have purchased this thing. And they have subscription options, they have one-time options, they have recurring options, etc. So if your server, whether you're Epic or some indie, if your server is just getting the information, then you're good. But if you're an indie, and this is where we get into some interesting antitrust situation, if you're an indie, you have to build your own server. That's annoying.
Yeah, well, having it be an option is one thing. Having it be the only option is potentially another thing. That's where monopoly power becomes concerning, at least from an antitrust point of view, right? So I think these investigations are going to continue in Europe. Hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars might well be pushed onto Apple as a sort of a fee, a punishment for forcing the App Store as the only option. I
Otherwise
wouldn't be
known
surprised.
as Apple's daily lunch budget.
Right. What's less clear is what, if anything, is going to happen in this American lawsuit between Epic Games and Apple. It started because Epic Games was like, well, it's one thing to take a 30% cut of the original app that people downloaded through your store. But now, even if there's in-app purchases, if there's subscriptions, you're taking a cut from that as well. Why?
Yeah, and this is where I actually
Want
start.
to avoid that. What they actually wanted to do was discount their own prices, and they couldn't find a way to do that in a cost-effective way and also give Apple a 30% cut. That's where
And
this really started.
And if you have any interest in this and you want to carry that interest forward, then you have to become super interested specifically in what the FTC is going to do under a Biden administration.
Right. And this is one where I've always been in favor of the law needing to catch up to the technology.
Yeah.
It may well be the case that this is a lost battle as far as this lawsuit goes, but maybe that points to where the law needs to catch up to what's going on in the marketplace. You know, we've already had the argument about can vendors like Apple force you to use AT&T, for example? They lost that one. And now it feels like they're trying to do it with software. They want this firm control over what you can and can't download. And that includes potentially censoring very popular games and applications just because
Yeah.
they
And
want
to
their cut.
and to get into a slight bit of weeds in terms of what it means for Fortnite on iPhone is that the performance of GeForce Now in the Safari web browser is going to be a matter of legal concern. So if that works well, then maybe everything is fine and dandy. But if it works poorly, maybe you have to think about Chrome. And if Chrome gets blocked from the App Store, then we get to see old rivals go at it again. And I am going
Yeah.
to get all of the fucking popcorn.
The last thing they want to do is get Google on the other side of a lawsuit. I think that's where it really becomes a losing proposition for Apple. So the good news is when this Fortnite browser version comes on, I expect it to be fairly responsive and playable. The downside is though you can't use a controller with it. It's just not going to function that way. It's touch only.
Yeah, and that's a technical limitation, which is going to become part of the actual legal battle because there's no controller standard on the web. There is if you put it through the App Store. Therefore, here's an actual concern because if the experience is shitty on a phone, on an iPhone, versus the experience being shitty on an Android, which it won't be because Google lets developers do whatever the fuck they want, including install arbitrary apps onto their device with the user actually saying, yeah, I know what I'm doing, just let me install it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this seems like such a difficult subject matter, and I think, like you guys said, I feel like sort of how we move forward is whatever our government sort of their decision is on like the rights of the internet. Like
Sure.
I think a lot of it is tied into the culture and the politics and the legal matters of what concerns like a free internet. Like
Right.
once we sort of figure that out, I think like we're just due for all these like really messy, confusing legal battles.
Oh, yeah.
Wherever it goes. Like right now it's like payment vendors and payment strategies on walled gardens. Next it's something like you said, that reigniting the browser wars within Google
Yeah.
and stuff.
And
Like what the hell?
And the
Yeah.
key thing with Fortnite is that it's trivial for any lawmaker or anyone really who wants to actually make an argument here to go, but what about the kids, ladies and gentlemen? And
Oh
so
yeah, true.
like it's fair for them to go like, no. Like what Apple's doing is legit because Apple has on their platform parental controls. So what's happening on the it's very easy for this to go. So whatever is allowed to happen on the internet needs to be controlled. And then everyone's gonna go,
Mm,
oh God, no. So like that kind of thing actually becomes, a sticky conversation that's actually kind of
right.
scary and dangerous because it really depends on what's your platform of choice. And if you have a platform of choice, that's a long conversation. But if you have one, then you actually have to start weighing the pros and the cons and you have to start weighing like what's going on here because
Yeah.
it's possible for Google to turn this around into something that makes people go, I just want Androids actually because Apple does too much.
Yeah, well, it's helpful to remember that back in the day when Apple was allowed to force you to use a particular cellular provider,
Mhm.
monthly prices were about a third higher than what they dropped to a year after the lawsuit that forced them to allow any provider to use Apple devices. In the same way, I wouldn't be surprised if these monopolies were shut down to see software prices for the consumer drop by up to 20% on average. It
Mm,
wouldn't be surprising at all, and that's a lot. That's a big chunk of change for a lot of people right there.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So that's my interest for today. And
James, final thoughts.
So I'm no, part is I'm surprised that stuff can run on phones and stuff these days anyway. I've,
I
remember
know,
when they
right?
flipped?
Well, things have gotten to a point, which honestly John Carmack called, where it's like GPUs and CPU/GPUs are going to become trivial. Everyone will have these. And we're not kidding when we say this. Like, because of secondhand devices, everyone in the world is going to be able to play 3D rendered games at 60 frames per second, period.
Period. Yeah, it's going to be trivial. We're all gamers now.
I thought it was much, like, I remember 2 years ago when Xbox first put out the stream thing, and it was like he was playing Xbox from his home at work on his phone with
Yeah,
his controller, and that was
it's wild, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
part of why when I talk about Rogue Company, I'm like, hey, it's owned by Epic. That's actually a good thing, is because like they're going to give a shit about the net code. They're going to give a shit about all of this stuff, and they're going to be smart about it. This game is going to play and stream and run good everywhere. So I'm going to be able to play this while I take a shit.
Yay.
This is important information, I swear.
Mhm.
But so I kind of want to transfer over to James's topic, which is so much the opposite. You will never have digital
It's
publishing
internet in the
fees
future.
or where,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and to be fair, I did a little bit of research into can you run Shadowrun online in some sort of elegant way? And the answer is but as far as tabletop games goes, it is one of the best. So I'm glad to have you discussing Shadowrun with us.
Yeah.
But before we do
I have
that,
my own qualms with Shadowrun, but that's mostly due to a questionable GM choice. But
Yeah.
Ah. But Mikey, my understanding is that you have to head out.
I do. I've got to help an auntie. You know how that goes.
All right. So as we go back to the analog world, feel free to digitally remove yourself, and
Yes.
we'll see you next week.
All right. Have fun. I'll be missing all the Shadowrun fun.
Yeah.
Later.
Later.
and then there were 3.
And many, many D6s because that's how Shadowrun works. Oh, I'm gonna have to turn off my thing here. Hold on.
Turn off your digital thing.
Turn
Your
off my
camera's
virtual background. 1 second,
Oh,
folks.
I can't see you now. I don't
That's
need
okay. I'll be back in a second.
to see. Okay.
get my bricks of D6s.
So, yeah, James, this is technically your discussion to lead.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what? So
Nah,
let's
Wow.
talk for a second. When we talk about tabletop role playing games, Dungeons and Dragons is the one most people have heard of, whether they've ever played it or not. They understand the general concept. You play a character. When it's time to do some actiony stuff, you roll some dice to determine whether you succeed or not. And the dude in charge, called a dungeon master or DM, tells you how the
we
game
refer to
goes in
them
general.
as a GM in the non-Dungeons and Dragons use.
Right. So Shadowrun, explain to me how Shadowrun is different from Dungeons and Dragons. Let's start with that.
In every way. No, the short answer is thematically, right? So it is
Dystopian future.
it's a dystopian far future. But
Not
Instead
even
of
far.
not even as far as you think. But what I mean by far future is you don't recognize this world. That is fundamental to Shadowrun. This is the world as you know, late capitalist nightmare and like mega corporations and all that good shit is going on.
Corporations are governments.
Corporations are
Right.
basically governments.
Yeah.
No, they
The
literally
key,
are.
I mean, yes, because the intranational, yeah, exactly. The the international bodies of legal concern in this world are all like run by companies, right? We have achieved what they call extra nationality, I believe, technically speaking,
Yeah,
and
I think it is.
there's a term for it, and like there's not only a term for it, there's
Yeah,
this.
but basically the mega corporations have taken over where
Yes.
governments used to be.
So clearly we're in
Essentially.
cyberpunk, and cyberpunk means a lot of
Think of it as
things.
Blade Runner with magic.
Yes, because Shadowrun is Blade Runner, except dragons fly around and run companies and do whatever the fuck they want, while standard human beings are existing in what they call sprawls. Think favelas, if you will, and like the income wealth distribution thing is so fucked that it's ridiculous. However, one of my favorite things about cyberpunk is it really should be inviting the question, don't you already exist in this hellscape? And Shadowrun, more than anything else I've ever experienced in my life, does this successfully because it's not actually technically in terms of time far future. In this universe, you exist in what they call the Sixth World, which coincidentally, the 6th edition that came out a year and a half ago is called Sixth World. Surprise, great marketing. So in the
I think they
Sixth
were
World,
always called the Sixth World, weren't they?
it was always called the Sixth World, but it was Shadowrun First Edition, Second Edition, Third Edition, Fourth Edition, Fifth Edition. This is just called Sixth World.
Okay.
So
And in
Branding.
some ways,
it's a marketing thing.
It's a proper reboot. In some ways.
Yeah. So it's a proper reboot in terms of game mechanics. The universe is still canonically what it always was, which is the Sixth World, because they label time as the periodic entering or leaving of magic, ebbs and flows, if you will, sine curves, if you will, if you're a nerd like me. And the beginning of the Sixth World was when, after for all of modernity, we had no magic, it came back. And how it came back is people started turning into elves, trolls, orcs, dwarves in an incredibly painful process called transmogrification. It
And
happened live.
yes, and meanwhile, anyone
Did
with
it?
some sort of latent magical talent
So
suddenly finds their full-blown abilities. Whether
yeah,
or not they can control them is another problem.
so
But
the actual trend of like the introduction of these things started with people having babies that looked wrong.
Okay, that's
And
what I thought
so
how it started.
it's because transmogrification keys into something genetically, but
mhm,
not actually like, like everyone can fuck everyone. Like you can have a half this, a half that, a half whatever, right? So these are technically not species, but that doesn't stop people from being racist as fuck. So
sure.
obviously there's hatred towards all non standard metahumans, as they call it, and you have all of the typical things. Elves tend to be wealthy motherfuckers because people think they're hot, I guess. I don't know.
They have their own
Uh,
land too.
orcs tend to be things that people are afraid of, but that doesn't stop you from playing a face character who has so much charisma that everyone wants to fuck them. And dwarves are tiny, and they like typically doing things like being a rigger so that they can have little robot drones and have them go everywhere, because dwarves are obviously an archetype that they're keying off of.
Sure.
Meanwhile, trolls, people are terrified of trolls. Like if you're scared of orcs and you're like, oh no, scary orc, I'm good, like it can punch me in the face and I'll die. Then you
Yeah.
see a
Yeah.
troll and it's like 7 foot something tall, and you're basically like, please don't eat me if you're a racist. So like that's the thing that this game does so well. It takes so many concepts and puts them into the real world in a way that invites you to go, hey, who's the bad guy? Have fun. And
Right.
like I have an interest because I have been reading the core rule books since third edition because I'm a fucking nerd, and I read rule books for games that I'd never play. And fifth edition, I
That's what we all
ran,
do.
yeah, I guess.
I
Fifth
think I
edition,
ran third edition or so long
Shelf
ago.
of
third edition
RPGs.
was around for a long time.
Nice.
James has run probably more different varieties of games than any human being I know. And fifth edition stuck around for a while. Uh, I ran a fifth edition game. It was short lived, but it was fun. We used pre-built characters, and it was a good time. It was the first time I ever actually led a game. The first time I actually game mastered a game. So Sixth War came out a year and a half ago. Pandemic hits, and I'm like, I like Shadowrun. I start reading the rule book to help me sleep, literally. And then I'm like, is there a sixth edition somewhere around 3 in the morning? Because I was reading, but like I was so interested in what I was reading that I wasn't sleeping because sleep is for suckers. I don't know. I have a day job. So so I looked into it and I was like, oh, I'm buying everything. I'm buying all the things. I'm buying all the like I bought the beginner's box. I bought the core rule book. I bought all the
Yep.
essential
Yep.
shit because like
Yep.
I'm running a game. Like I've decided like it's fucking happening. So
Yeah.
so I started to read the book. I started to listen to the audio stuff, and there's some interesting ways that they change the rules, and that's what I want to pivot to because you get a sense of the world. It's cyberpunk with magic. You know what's going on. There's 4 layers here. You got fighting with your fists. You've got fighting with your cyber deck. Hack, 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 hack all the things. You've got fighting with magic, which involves the astral plane that exists in the same space as the physical space, which technically the Matrix does too. And then if there is a fourth layer, it's the social shit, because social shit is actually modeled in this game in a very, very, very significant fashion. That's the thing that got me interested in Shadowrun, broadly speaking.
Hmm.
So gameplay wise, what do we want to talk about?
Yeah. What's your experience been with the game that you've been playing?
So I ran a game and I plan on running a sixth. The weirdest thing, but it's also a strength that Shadowrun has, is put away your D10s, put away your D20s, put away your D100s, put
And get out
away
so many D6s.
so many
This
D6s
is maybe one player's
that it will make
D6s, maybe.
your brain explode. A normal roll for a new character that is specified for a specific skill is probably like 20 fucking dice for something that they're good at.
That's no. See,
Really?
that's
Yes.
pre-6.
No,
So this is
no, it's in 6. I've listened to podcasts for 6th
Really?
edition, and if you know what you're doing, a social role for a skill that you have an expertise in, that you also might have some like conditional buffs for, is going to
Yes.
get in the range of like 15 to 20 dice.
Huh. So
That's a
I did,
lot higher than I remember.
Because you're
yeah.
probably not good at doing the stuff that people who have been playing this for decades and it's their game.
The
can do.
min-maxing that people do. And I think I want to pause for a second to say, for people that can be turned off by role-playing games because in their mind it involves a lot of math, when we talk about rolling a lot of dice, that does not mean you're adding all the numbers together. That's not how Shadowrun works.
Yes.
Actually, I want to give this one to James. Can you explain to me what happens if I roll a bunch of dice for a skill? How do I determine whether I succeeded or not?
Well, as long as it hasn't, if it hasn't changed,
No.
it's
It has not.
No.
basically there is only success and failure. So there's only 2 faces of the dice that actually count as successes, and
Yes.
so you only ever need to keep track of 3 sides of the dice: the
So
1,
for
the 5,
every
and the
dice
6.
that you have a 1/3 chance of getting a hit and or a nothing for that
Or
dice.
a success or a failure, because socially
Not
speaking,
exactly.
you don't hit.
Well, you can
You
glitch.
don't want to call it exactly. You don't want to call it a failure because the way that everything rolls up into the actual result of rolling
Yeah.
15 dice is complicated, but less complicated than Dungeons and Dragons. Each dice,
Right.
1/3 chance to get a hit. Every 3 dice, you're probably going to get 1 hit. Every 3 dice you can think of as I will on average get 1 hit. And there is less variance than in Dungeons and Dragons, where every single time that you roll a d20, you have a 1 in 20 chance of critical failing. So the way that you get critical failures in this game is notably very, very, very different. You have 2 different types of critical failures in Shadowrun. You have a glitch and a critical glitch. And I'm probably fucking up the D&D parlance, so please don't at me. If you roll 0 hits, you have glitched. These are mostly harmless. This is you doing something goofy, but if it's something like shooting a gun, you might drop your gun. It's not catastrophic. A critical failure is when you have no hits and most of your dice is a 1 or a 2.
So it's far less likely that you'll, for instance, shoot yourself in the foot.
Yes.
Because I thought a glitch was that if you had a reasonable amount of 1s, and a critical glitch was more than half of the dice were 1s. So because you could just miss, and that was
Yes,
no
you're
hits.
right. You're right. And here's why that's important. Glitches happen. Critical glitches are very rare. And here's one thing that makes GM, like, it might make your brain explode in terms of the math, but it's really fun for game masters. It is entirely possible to succeed and glitch.
I did it.
Strange.
Bad stuff still happens.
Yes. So I shot that dude in the face because I'm so good at shooting a gun, but I dropped my gun. Or the gun is now jammed. Or whatever the hell the GM wants to do.
Right. So what I recall is that the GM has a lot of power to determine what those rules really mean.
Yes.
Right. So what is your GM like in Shadowrun, James? Is he kind of he's more interested in the storytelling, or he's kind of a hard ass in making your combat difficult and upping the challenge for you, or what's your experience?
Okay, well, I haven't actually played Shadowrun in, I think, 2 years.
Okay.
Like, since before 6 came out. I played in a Shadowrun game back in college, and that's the one where I was like, that was.
Okay.
So there was interesting, and then I played 2 years at Gen Con for 5th edition. So I played 4th edition in college, and 5th edition at Gen Con. And the story behind the college game, which is the one that carried on, it was he was a long-term Shadowrun player. He'd been playing since like he was a kid, because he was like someone who'd gone to the college years ago. And
it's amazing to me that there are people that have not been raised on this game.
Yeah,
Was he a
he
classic?
played a 0-level character.
Dang, man.
Was
They-
That's
he?
They
something
started their
else.
game as 0-level characters.
Jesus
Oof.
Christ. Was he a classic rules Nazi?
Yes and no, because
Mm.
it was 4th edition was new at this time, and he was
Okay.
trying to run it in a 3rd edition setting.
Oof.
So we were running into problems constantly because there's
Yeah.
basically there is no Wi-Fi, but all the rules we have are for Wi-Fi.
Right.
Right. Yeah,
that's
that's
so that,
problematic.
so that gives you an example of the long-term trouble of like trying to make a game like this, because by 3rd edition, clearly the second Great Matrix crash has actually occurred, and the second Great Matrix crash is when all of technology died, kind of, and all of the companies said, okay, let's rebuild this, but everything is wireless.
Right. So all the character types that involved interfacing with the internet, like their lives are quite different than older versions of Shadowrun, for sure.
Exactly. So
And
try doing
overall, in a
what
good
you
way.
just
I
said.
think that they've done some effort to try and simplify things, because what used to happen is you would have combat, and the person who's doing the internet hacking stuff, their turn would take so long compared to
Exactly.
everyone
And
else.
that's all the way through 5th edition.
Yeah, yeah. Just because, like, time and computers, actually you can process things very quickly,
So
which is great, but
time management is easily the biggest issue with 5th edition.
mm,
Specifically because the rules behind how a single combat turn, which lasts 6 seconds of time, goes are ridiculous. And in 5th edition, you can do things such as have your street samurai actually have like 7 actual attempts to do shit, which they would call a phase, I think, within a
Mhm.
single combat turn, because their initiative is so high that they are a fucking ninja, apparently, right? So like
right.
in
So
6
basically,
seconds,
everybody gets one turn, and then that guy gets like 6.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
they're
Crazy.
Summer Glau's character in Firefly, right? Like they could
Sure.
do the math so fast that they can apparently shoot 30 people in the face in 6 seconds.
Yeah.
At the cost of their humanity.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and share this hilarious old video from, like, I think
Oh my God,
the
this is so
90s. I
funny.
think it's great.
Wait,
But it does
It's great.
establish the fundamentals, because
Sure.
one of go ahead, James.
I thought the combat rounds were actually shorter in Shadowrun because a D&D combat round
Mhm.
is 6 seconds. Aren't like
Right.
Shadowrun combat rounds
They might be
like
3?
3 seconds or something
Maybe,
like that?
They're
maybe.
very short.
I know
Yeah.
that time window is
I
what it is.
remember hearing that.
But it
Mhm.
might have gotten doubled to 6th edition. I don't know, because I'm like reading 6th edition, but I remember 5th edition, so it's all a fucking blur. But yeah, here you can see like this is what this was trying to be in the fucking 80s, because I think that this is actually tied to the Sega Genesis video game, judging by the logo.
Yeah, and it does kind of tell you where the origins of this world come from. It is very cyberpunky, and very, very 80s school. And as much as they've moved on from that a little bit, I'm gonna show, like, this is the cover of a book, right? We've only moved a certain amount from that aesthetic, right?
Yeah, and now
We've still got it at the heart of the
now it's
world in some
neon. Now
ways.
it's neon cyberpunk, right? Like over here, you can
Sure.
see there's some neon, right?
Now
And you
we've
look at
incorporated elements of steampunk. You see lots of goggles and
yep,
bizarro gadgets in the
right, because
Shadowrun world.
punk does actually mean like a fairly consistent thing depending on the specific punk genre, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that like this aesthetic has actually kind of carried through. It's just been updated throughout the years. Like here you can see it's nighttime, right? Here you can see that you have the characters we like and the characters you don't like, and the characters that we like because they're doing cool shit just like took out a cop with her mind because she's
Magic.
a sorcerer. And like that's
Yeah.
cool. And this party is made up of 2 chicks and a dude, and the dude's job is literally to just be fucking terrifying and hold a gun. He hasn't fired this gun once. And like all
Not
of
yet.
these archetypes, they actually kind of carry through to the current one in all sorts of interesting ways. Particularly through the book that you just showed, you can see that this is neon now, which is appropriate because we're kind of tired of all the dark shit.
Mhm.
Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be the brightest cyberpunk thing I've ever seen in terms of the color temperature. I didn't like the new Blade Runner movie because everything was fucking dark all the time. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't like that movie, but like that's one of them. It's just old cyberpunk.
Yeah, that gritty aesthetic. We still want some grit because we need to get across that the income inequality is just off the hooks. I love this that she's got this plug in her head, by the way. But we do want to update it to kind of show how we've digitalized and virtualized our
Yeah.
world. So it isn't just this one hacker person who can do cool internet stuff and it's trippy,
And
but
they
to
can't
some
do
extent
everything.
we all live in a world that feels a little bit more like the internet in
Yes.
Shadowrun.
And that's why it's actually important that a combat turn in terms of real world time actually takes the same amount of time in every layer of the game, which is something that I think they may have solved in 6th edition.
And how did they do that?
They did it by simplifying the rules. So it used to be that a character could get 2 passes in a combat turn, whatever you want to call them. Let's call them passes.
Initiative pass. That's what it was
Initiative
called. Yeah.
pass. I don't think that's actually possible anymore, because the way it used to work is that you have an initiative score for that encounter and it gets decremented every combat turn, and if it's still above 0, you get another pass for that 6-second time window. And if I'm not mistaken, in the 6th
3
edition
seconds.
rules, 3 seconds, whatever it is, right? I mean, GMs can change it if they feel like it. That's how pen and paper stuff works. And so, like, depending on how good your players are and how much they know the rules, you can play accordingly. But the core thing that they're trying to address in 6th edition, because I listened to the people who designed the game actually speak about it, is that they want to make a combat turn simple. They want to keep the game moving. And one of those things that you do is everyone gets a turn and you move on. So a lot of things in terms of the actions are grossly simplified. Rules Nazis are probably going to be like hashtag not my Shadowrun, and they can go play 5th edition because I don't care about them. The 6th edition rules are really, really accessible in terms of we simplified what an action is. We simplified what a turn is. We simplified all this shit at the cost of being highly specific, because you either have a GM that you like or you have a GM that you hate, and you're going to quit the game anyway, and we can't control that. So whatever.
The 5 Edis.
Yeah. So like that's
Every game simplifies.
yeah. So that's like the simplification at work that they're trying to do, because that's what everyone's trying to do. D&D is trying to do it. Everyone's trying to do it. They have this cultural moment that they might be able to latch onto, because Cyberpunk is about to get very cool again, because CD Projekt Red is about to drop a game that's going to make them $10 billion.
I think it is out now.
No, it's coming out in December. They got delayed a little bit.
So, but like no, sorry, I'm thinking of Cyberpunk Red, the table, the pen and paper
Right.
one.
So
just the Cyberpunk.
77 is based on Cyberpunk, what, 2022? I forget what it's called.
I thought it was 2077, isn't it?
Maybe they made a new version. Maybe that's what you're talking about.
That the
video
the
game,
paper game.
yes, the video game is tied to a paper property, right? And maybe like a lot of people might not know this shit. So like it's tied to a paper property. They probably are putting out a new edition because it makes so much sense to do that synergistically with the video game dropping, and that's going to be its own thing. But Cyberpunk
And that's what
2077 does not have magic, period. So that's a difference.
Which makes, to me, Shadowrun a lot more fun immediately.
Because there's a whole layer of like magic and what it means to people and society, and it also allows them to take people from Dungeons and Dragons and who like that kind of fantasy and go, oh, you like doing magic?
Here's the character for you, right? So you like your wizard, your cleric, your druid. Here's
Exactly.
the equivalent in Shadowrun for
And
you.
the biggest challenge that Shadowrun has had in terms of rules, in my opinion, having read many rule books, is that you need to make all of these layers work at the same time synergistically. When I ran my 5th edition game, I ran into some of the problems of the Matrix rules, because I, as a technical person, understand how the Matrix works in this game. Someone who just wants to do technical shit and doesn't care about how it works should still be able to play a hacker. And I think that's kind of important. And like, I remember one time when I was playing in James's Pathfinder game, I don't know how magic works because I don't fucking play like fantasy stuff very much, right? And no, this was Spycraft. And like, I wanted to keep the game moving, and I was like, I hacked the thing. And James was like, you can't just tell me that you hacked the thing. Tell me how you hacked the thing. And I'm like, I don't know. I do hacking shit. And so like, I have ADHD among all of the other disorders. And like for me, I'm just like, I just want to keep it moving along. I want to do the thing. I want to hack the thing. Let's go. Gotta go fast. And like, I play Hammond for a reason.
I forget if I just wanted flavor
child.
or not, because that game gets complicated.
Yeah, and it also like is meant to be moved along quickly. So you're probably just asking for flavor. So I started thinking deeply about like what the fuck is my character actually doing, which is good. But in Shadowrun sense, we get a bit more specific, and there are simple things that you can do because it's an entire world that's been thought through. And for example, just like in Nvidia in 1980. Physically jacking into a machine is still important because in terms of security protocols, if there's something you need that is valuable, it's not going to be easily accessible via wireless communication. And from a security perspective, the only way that you can get past a firewall or other kind of complicated security things, which is still true in the real world right now, is to physically jack in. When I worked at Adobe, there were rules about who can plug a computer into a wall. Because of this reason, if you see an open Ethernet jack and you plug into it and you're not an Adobe employee, you may have just done something illegal. That is genuinely how this works. So this is why I like Cyberpunk, because on some level, this is the world I live in already. Like, I know what the modern megacorporation is, and like, I need to roleplay that because otherwise I will hate my job.
Ouch.
And that's just the reality for me personally of being a programmer, right? They want to treat me like a code monkey. I don't want to be treated like a code monkey. How do I negotiate this? Is my life.
Yeah.
How can I send you a picture?
You should be able to
put it in
screen
Zoom
share, or you can put it in Zoom chat.
Yeah, screen sharing also works. Yeah, so I will say this.
There you
I
go.
looked into whether it's possible to do this kind of game elegantly from your computer, since so many of us in the pandemic world are running games remotely. So the tool I use the most.
Interesting to say.
Well,
Sorry.
the tool I have been
I've got
using
it.
the
Just give me a
most
minute.
is Roll20.net, and it does an excellent job of allowing me to run my D&D game, including character sheets, dice rolling. You can do video and audio streaming directly through the web page, and because it's browser based, you can put it on anything. There we go. I'm going to share the thing.
All right, let me read this comic for audio people, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, frame 1. Reboot under the Linux operating system. Run the offline password editor. There are the administrator passwords I need. Frame 2. Remove my memory stick. Reboot under the original operating system. Log in as administrator. I'm ready to install updates. Frame 3. If people knew how much security is lost when someone has physical access to their machine, they'd keep their computers locked inside a safe and wrapped in barbed wire. That is accurate. That
That's
is
very
absolutely
true.
accurate.
I've been at employers that disable USB drives for exactly this reason.
And the operating system at this point has the ability for a corporation to actually control your ability to do something like that at a kernel level. You literally plug something in and it'll be like, IT has been notified. You're not allowed to access this drive or do anything.
Right. Okay, but going back to my thing. So Roll20.net will allow you to use hex maps, which have been more of a Shadowrun thing. It's not obligated. You're not obligated to use hex maps, but that's how the original game was.
Yeah, I don't think they prescribe anything in Shadowrun in terms of
not anymore.
space.
Yeah. But what it does not do is provide easy character sheet support as they do with D&D. Ironically, if you want to play in German, you can have 6th edition Shadowrun. And you can have a sort of a 5th edition one. It's not the best model framing I've ever seen, so it's a little glitchy. But you can do a sort of 5th edition version of Shadowrun character sheets in English or several other languages. So this could use a little bit more work in the Roll20 world. I'm not even sure quite what it takes to include that kind of support in their stuff.
Well,
I think a lot of it is who's willing to put in the effort and contact Roll20 and try and get your stuff uploaded as a default.
And it's not just about that, which is a serious concern because the company that owns Shadowrun and is putting out 6th edition, I don't know the exact name, but I know that like you can buy it on the Catalyst store.
Yeah, it is Catalyst. The people behind MechWarrior and Shadowrun.
Yeah.
It's Catalyst now. They have the rights.
And so they're not terribly mobile friendly. They're not terribly digitally friendly, but they do some things. For example, you cannot from the Catalyst store, you cannot from the Catalyst store, to my knowledge, buy anything that is a book of Shadowrun Sixth World without gaining the ability to download permanently a PDF file of that book.
Right. And
Wait, what?
so you
So
also,
the Catalyst store, if you buy from there, I can go right now into my email, find the link, and download the PDF version of everything that I have purchased. And that link does not expire.
right. So if you buy a physical book, you automatically get the digital version, which is not the case
A
in
lot of
D&D
people do
world.
that. Well,
And in
except
fact,
for-
D&D is even worse. If you want to use a little app like D&D Beyond, which allows you to make character sheets in a mobile environment,
Separate
you end up
purchases.
buying stuff again, and it's so frustrating to people. So this is a kind of an interesting hybrid problem. It isn't as easy to use digitally, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper, is what I'm finding. So it's still viable. You're just going to have to do a little extra effort and ask people to pull out their own pencils and paper, or just use the default characters. If you get this Shadowrun beginner box, it includes not only character sheets for beginner characters, but full profiles on them, including backgrounds and histories and, you know, all the stuff that you might spend a lot of time working on yourself.
Yeah.
I'm used to like pre-gen characters. What?
So that's like something I
Print me
availed
off a
myself
sheet.
for my 5th edition game. Is I knew that I was introducing this game to a lot of people who did not know this game. So I was not going to bore them, literally bore them, with the character creation process that is so significantly different from anything they've ever seen that it will take hours and hours and hours to get one person to create a new character. I'm not doing that shit. I want to play. So I just gave people a pool of characters, of the pre-generated characters, and I said, these are your starting characters, pick one. And whoever showed up that day, whoever wanted to play whichever character, that was up to them. When my cousin Matthew actually like jumped in, he didn't jump in to like with a particular character. He played one game and he was like, I guess I'll be this hacker dude. And you know, that's just
You just
GM.
chose the most difficult character possible.
It
but-
was challenging
okay.
for me because I had to let him do shit without being like, okay, but what did you do, right? Like what did you actually try to do? And the rules can guide you a little bit, but to start wrapping up the conversation on Shadowrun, here's an example of something that I love. It's very basic, it's very simple, and it's very comprehensible. Every time that you do a skill check whatsoever, what you are targeting is called a threshold. You need this many number of hits on your D6s in order to succeed at this check. And if you achieve that threshold, which sometimes is determined by an opposing force doing stuff, but nonetheless, if you succeed at that threshold, what you tried to do is a success. But the level of success depends on the net hits. And the net hits lets the GM do whatever they want with that success. So the difference between shooting someone in the throat, shooting someone in the head, shooting someone and they explode is all really a matter of the GM figuring out what to do with the net hits. And also the person role playing.
Right.
And technically then couldn't you, like, even if you rolled all successes, not meet a threshold if you just didn't have enough dice?
Yeah, and that's a very easy number to actually compute, right? Like, what is my dice? How hard is this going to be? Well, on average, if I have 3x that thing, we're good.
All right, so I think I'm gonna try and wrap it up here, if that's okay with you guys.
James, you want to talk forever?
If you
Also,
guys
I
want
have
to
a
continue,
topic,
you are
a
welcome.
topic for next time, perhaps, is
Okay.
because
Oh, yeah?
I remember you I was listening to the catalog backwards. You had we're talking about Roll20 and like a whole in a segment. Of the 6 to 8 games that I've played in the last 3 years, I think only 2 of them used a map. Everything else was theater of the mind all the way through.
Yes.
as an interesting
Yep.
way to run the
Highly
games.
underrated, for sure.
And very quickly, Shadowrun is actually good at giving you a concept that abstracts range.
Hmm.
Does
Yeah.
this gun work at short, medium, long, super long, etc.?
All right, cool. So Shadowrun, if you're not playing D&D, you want something different, sounds like an excellent alternative. I
Not
better be
always
interested in
playing the
playing
good
one.
guys.
Not always playing the good guys, and sometimes not even knowing who the good guys are exactly. Makes it much more interesting. All right. So we're going to wrap up here, but it's been an excellent week, and we'll see folks again next week. Yeah? All
Bye.
right.